So good morning. It's wonderful to be here, particularly on this beautiful day on this beautiful campus. So Matthew, thank you for hosting us down here. It's very nice to be here. So what I'm going to do is present some of the basic principles that were represented in my Ithaca brief on leveraging the Liaison model. There was also another piece that was in college and research libraries that looked at the sort of beginning of Liaison movement out of Minnesota, and then fast forwarding to today and where things stand. But I just also reflecting on the work that my colleagues at Cornell, Columbia, and Toronto have been doing as well. So I'm going to go quickly through a couple of things that will not seem like rocket science to you at all, but setting some of the context around where the 21st century information professional is positioned. And these three major issues, economic digital realities, global engagement, and collaborative imperative, I think are real game changers for us in the 21st century research library. So, you know, the first on the list is the twin pressures of economic and digital realities. We all know, those of us who've had children who've gone to college, and if we read the newspapers, we understand that there is a great deal of questioning of the value of higher education, the unrelenting increases in tuition. The costs of higher education is increasing faster than the military budget, which speaks volumes around issues. At the same time, funding for research, particularly from the feds, has been plummeting, and there are yet continuing demands, continuing requirements for transdisciplinary research, for particularly in the STEM disciplines and beyond. So it's just this pressure and financial scrutiny comes down to the library as well. Second, the digital knowledge ecosystem just permeates everything we do, really taking off in the last decade or so. Scholarship, science, education are all being transformed, literally transformed by digital. Even humanists who work with photographs and manuscripts and print on paper are becoming digital knowledge workers. They're looking at ways to not only do new forms of scholarship, but to new forms of inquiry and creative engagement with resources, bringing together high-end, high-performance computing, network access, huge corpuses of digital content, and then computational capabilities are really changing the way the scholarship and education is being done. This image, while it's an older image, I think has become kind of iconic of that change. This is the image of looking at Google Books, text mining of Google Books, to look at when the change in the common reference to the United States occurred from the United States are to the United States is. And you see that the red line is the United States are, which was very dominant up through the Civil War. And then the United States is, which is this blue line, dotted line, it crosses over in Reconstruction, right after the Civil War. This information was critical in Judge Chin's analysis of the Authors Guild legal suit against Google for the digitization of materials. Judge Chin and then subsequently the Supreme Court this year threw out the case, arguing that the digitization and the ability to text mine that information was transformative rather than an infringement of copyright. A hugely significant legal event occurred here. Second, beyond economic and digital realities is global engagement. My colleague Sheen Lee and I just produced another Ithaca brief, which is focusing on research libraries in global universities. But as we look at what is happening, particularly in the United States, that aspiration to be globally engaged, the reach out either in terms of the kind of research that's going on, or sending students abroad or bringing students in, has been incredibly transformative. The United States leads higher education around the world in creating international campuses. There are 52 US institutions that have 82 campuses developed, with many more in the works around the world. The number of students that have come to the United States has skyrocketed. It increased 10% last year. It's approaching 1 million students. It's a multi-billion-dollar operation, economic boon for this country. And the number of students going abroad is also increasing, and it's about 300,000 last year. There is now 400 colleges and universities that have signed the pledge for Generation Study Abroad. I think Stony Brook isn't on the list, but I think it should be on the list, which is, but there are 55 ARL libraries on that list, and their pledge is to double the number of students that have international experiences by decade's end, from 10% of all undergraduates to 20% of all graduates. We also see that research is being conducted on a global scale, not simply in the STEM disciplines. You can think of the genome issues, but global literary networks, work in the humanities and the arts are also deeply integrated internationally. This radargram, which you can't really see very much, is presented in the recent Ithaca brief that Sheen and I did, which looks at universities in terms of how globally responsive they are in terms of their reality and their aspirations. And it looks at 13 value points associated with that kind of work. This kind of stuff can really help us think through how research libraries today can engage in the global universities that our parent institutions are developing. Third issue, beyond economics, digital, and global, is the collaborative imperative. I think research universities in the 21st century and their libraries need to radically rethink definitions of borders and responsibilities in order to survive. It's necessary for a great university to have a great research library, but it's insufficient to the aspirations of that university and the demands of the faculty and students that they support. So we like to think at Cornell about research, our research library being an important node in a much broader international information network, and that what we do at Cornell is important, but it's equally important that we have developed collaborations around the world and within this country as well. I don't know whether you know about the partnership that Cornell and Columbia have developed called Too Cool, where we're looking at trying to build together the collective power of our content, subject expertise, and look behind the scenes around technical service operations and how we can leverage those, the activities in really pre and post competitive collaboration. Many of the things that we tend to compete about and many of the ARL statistics that are measured tend to emphasize the things that are competitive that really don't make our institutions more competitive at all. And we need to rethink those measures as well as rethink the way we do our work. We had a colleague from a national library visiting last week, and he was talking about the importance of this next generation of information professionals in his library. And one of the things that he looked at, indicators, was who are our main competitors? And I looked at this and I said, wow, why isn't there on that chart who are our main collaborators as well? So I think we need to move from this thinking of competitive intelligence to collaborative intelligence and being able to work together, particularly on huge issues that are beyond the capability of any one institution to do alone. So there's an awful lot of talk in the literature about operating at scale, but I think the scale needs to be suited to the kinds of activities that are being undertaken. Bigger doesn't necessarily mean better. Sometimes those dyads and triads make for a better and deeper collaboration than something where you have a lot of people working closely together. I think the basic challenge, and this is something that I posited in the article, in an age where some members of the academic community question the value and expense of a library or maintain antiquated notions of what a library does, it's our challenge to make them expect more and to deliver the expertise, services, and resources that are recognizable, quantifiable differentiators in their academic success. Jimmy Wales, co-founder of Wikipedia, says if it isn't on Google, it doesn't exist, and that's the mindset of a lot of people, including many in Washington, D.C. There's recent legislation to dismantle the government information system, the National Technical Information Act, to repeal it, and the legislation, the name for that legislation is just Google it. So it's no exaggeration to say that libraries are challenged to reconceptualize themselves and their place on campus. I think a colleague was at a conference recently and summed it up nicely. He said, everyone on campus thinks they know what the library is and does, and they've all got it wrong. And so it is our responsibility to try and redirect them to, and our services to pinpoint and target how we can be differentiators in their academic success. So what does all this mean for the academic information professional in the 21st century? We're not there yet. And so what is a library is a big question, but more specifically, what is a librarian? What do they do during this this time of deep transition? I do think our future will be ironically more virtual because so much of the digital reality will define the work that we do, but also more personal, that deep disciplinary or functional or technological expertise will be the future role that liaisons will play in the life of the academy. And we've seen this kind of environment produce the liaison model with a shift from a single focus of responsibility to the full spectrum of engagement with faculty and students. I think the liaison model is a step in the right direction, but I just think we're starting to scratch the surface of possibilities. And in the Ithaca SNR piece that I did, my first bullet point would have been the immaturity of the liaison program. I would actually argue today that it's less immature and more in the threat of stagnation is occurring, that stasis is becoming we're becoming too comfortable with what we already have in place. And so we're starting to congratulate ourselves for the work that we do rather than continuing to push and question and challenge ourselves in new ways. I think part of that is the natural tendency to confuse activities with results, and part of the problem with the liaison model is that we lack adequate benchmarks, assessment tools, and performance measures to help us measure our progress and continue to push forward. I also think another issue that is inherent in the liaison model is turf issues. As these portfolios have expanded to meet new needs and expectations, I think it's pretty clear that no one liaison can do it all. Domain specialists are increasingly reliant on functional experts to provide much needed expertise in addressing technical, legal, pedagogical kinds of issues as they emerge. But this can also lead to some real turf issues. I think the importance about the liaison model is interdependence is the key for moving forward, that it is more important to appreciate the liaison work that's being done and less important to focus on the individual labels. And so at the risk of reintroducing confusion on the part of academics that it's a team-based approach, I think that we need to focus again on the activities of it takes more than just one person to engage in all of this the work that we have set for ourselves. In terms of the work that we do, libraries have had the luxury of being able to be the center of the information universe, and that's no longer true. And so we've got a shift in our environment, and I know you all have been doing this. I was so impressed. Cornelia and I had an opportunity to visit the campus library, West Campus Library, and we're very, very impressed with the work that you all have done and working with students to reimagine that space. But being able to go from outside in rather than inside out is so key to the success of what we can do. This stakeholder map is from the Ohio State University, and they developed it as part of their effort to look at research life cycle. And they began with doing a stakeholder analysis before even thinking about the kinds of programs that we would do. Let me give you an example from the global issues. So past experience for international students coming to our campuses can set expectations and can affect student success. So some international students who come to the U.S. Do not fully appreciate the fact that academic norms may differ, that copying someone else's work is problematic on this in the United States and can be considered plagiarism and illegal. Yet consulting a reference librarian may be seen as something in their previous institutions which was a no-no. So being able to shift norms and cultures and appreciate what they come with will be key to our success. So for instance, as we engage in social media, those folks coming from China are actually staying on WeChat and QQ as their preferred modes of social media communication. And we're trying to reach them on Facebook and IMing, so we need to be engaging in their space, not just ours. This is certainly true at Cornell, maybe true here. We may have just incredibly wonderful programs, but making that last little mile in a communication chain, which gets our message to the appropriate audience, can be incredibly frustrating. You may remember, some of you may remember the modem dial-up. You may be on an Internet 2 backbone, but coming to your own house was a modem dial-up, and everything slowed down to that last 100 feet of connectivity. And the same thing applies in terms of communicating with users. This pie chart is from a study we did with faculty a year and a half ago. We repeated it this spring with graduate students. The question was on information literacy programs that the library provided. In terms of the faculty, which about half of the faculty responded to the survey, which is an incredible response rate. 1/3 of them used our information sessions, library sessions. 2/3 of them did not. Of those who did use them, they were deemed valuable because they felt that 1/3 of all faculty said that fewer than half of their undergraduates had the information literacy skills that were necessary to be successful in their classes. So those who used it found it helpful. Of those who did not use the information literacy capabilities of the library, over 1/3 of them didn't even know they existed. And when you got to the graduate students, it was even worse. 55% of them didn't know that the library provided that kind of support. So there's a misconnect here based on communication. So strategies moving forward, these are laid out in the Liaison model, in the clear brief. I think focusing not on our indicators, but the university's indicators. We look at U.S. News and World Report rankings when they are favorable to our institution. When they're not, we tend to discount them, but nonetheless, there's a lot of gaming that goes on in universities to try and up their rankings, and issues around success. So for instance, underrepresented minorities and international students, the emphasis is being shifted away from recruiting to retention and performance. To me, that's a great signal for how does the library intervene in the life of international students and underrepresented minorities to help them move up the quadrants in terms of success and retention rather than recruitment. Partnering on campus, I think, is really important. So the University of Cincinnati, which has really, the library there has redefined itself as a globally responsive research library, has just partnered with the office, the Vice Provost for Research, in a joint position they both fund on integrated research. I think that's a very, very significant kind of model to look at. How do we take advantage of those who are somewhere in that chain of success, whether it's in research, teaching, or learning. Developing those intervention strategies that are most key to pain points. So at the Cornell, we discovered that someone who has a federal grant has to engage in 6 separate offices on campus. That's ridiculous because, you know, basically they ought to be spending their time doing research. How do we intervene in that process to smooth the bureaucracy of activity? Scaling labor-intensive efforts. You know, you want to reach every single person, but that is impossible unless they want to quadruple or, you know, increase 100-fold the number of librarians. So being able to focus through data analysis where human intervention is most key. A great example of scaling labor-intensive efforts comes out of MIT. You know, they have an open access policy, and last year they struck a deal with Springer to have Springer deposit articles that are published by MIT faculty directly into their institutional repository. There's a huge amount of overhead around getting faculty publications into IRs, and by doing this, they've scaled that. And building iteratively through quantification of goals and progress. You're not going to make it all in, Rome's not built in one day, so what do you start with? And really aligning with academic goals and success measures. So out of the article, I recommended some measures of success on the far right, which were very much academically oriented. So for instance, in terms of research funding competitiveness, the fourth one down, the measure of success is the number of grants submitted, because the greater the number of grants submitted, the higher the number of grants achieved. It's like, you know, being an encyclopedia salesperson, you know, it's just volume. How many doors do you knock on? The success rate and the amount of funding received. Those are all academic indicators that mean something to the university. So then if you push backward, what does it mean in terms of library intervention? So at the base level, maybe we work to identify grant opportunities, characterize previously published research online and in print. Good would be assist in data management planning because of federal requirements or open access deposit. Compiling the literature review section, and better might be serving as co-PIs or members of research teams, connecting faculty across disciplinary lines, and conducting or partnering in systematic reviews, which is a very common kind of thing in the medical field, and increasingly moving into other sciences and the social sciences. Two things I want to say about this since the article was published. First, in terms of institutional repositories, and that's the top one, where the upward trend measure would be number and percentage deposited by faculty. We were surprised at Cornell to learn that 50% of faculty in all but 2 schools had deposited in institutional repositories or subject repositories managed by the library. That was an incredible thing. When we looked at the 2 schools that had not, business and law, and they were concerned because they were looking to SSRN to serve as their, helping to define their academic profiles. So they felt if they deposited in our institutional repositories, it would take away from SSRN credibility. And now we have Elsevier having taken over SSRN. So what will that mean in the future? And there are a number of efforts to free that information from the clutches of Elsevier. So following on the model of archive.org, which is managed by Cornell Library. There's a SocArchive now in the process of being developed. This is clearly a watch this space kind of thing. Additionally, greater attention is being paid in a number of campuses, and I don't know whether at Stony Brook this is true, in looking at the value of author IDs. We're focusing on ORCID IDs with a goal by 2017 having 50% of the faculty in a number of our engineering, veterinary medicine, and ag and life science having ORCID IDs. MIT actually assigned ORCID IDs to everyone, which sounds like a good idea, but in fact many of them already had ORCID IDs, and so there was this duplicate problem. ORCID IDs are actually something the individual should be working on rather than an institutional approach. Then the other thing I would say around global engagement is the need, I think, for the library to really embrace as the whole library concept this global engagement. International students, international research, students studying abroad, all of this requires both cultural and language expertise as well as disciplinary expertise. Chinese students are the largest population on many campuses, including Cornell. and they may be in engineering, but the engineering librarians may be very good at what they do, but they're clueless around the needs that Chinese students may have. So a partnership between our Asia curators and our engineering librarians is really called for. So looking at that, but also looking at, I mentioned the complacency of our effort. We might point, in terms of global activity, we might point to, we have an international lib guide, or we have an MOU with another institution, or we've done site visits at international institutions. What has that really led to in terms of change at our own institutions? What has come from that site visit? How deeply embedded in institutional planning is the library in terms of international engagement? Have we become a forethought rather than an afterthought in those efforts? We might be providing access remotely, but are they actually receiving? Can they get through those firewalls in China or slow modem connections in Africa? So looking at not just the push out, but what is the take up and response rate becomes just really important. Moving beyond the institution, I've already made this kind of argument that every one of our institutions will have to do some very similar things to assist our faculty and students to succeed academically, and this just cries out for collaborative program development. And Cornelia will be speaking about that, and some of the things that I think lend themselves to collaborative effort are a core understanding of what it means to engage, setting of practices, benchmarks, and integrative development across campuses. So, thank you all very much, and look forward to the discussions.